Welcome to Project Peak Performance. On this week's episode, I'm joined with Dave and with Rob Brady. And the spotlight, if you visualize it, is being shined right on Rob's head. In fact, at the moment, it's some natural light coming in his window on his right-hand side, but the spotlight is firmly on him. Rob is going to share a number of key takeaways from the last year. And I think the reason why I would hang around and listen to this episode is Rob's a very different character in what he's achieving in his goals in his life over the last 12 months than 12 months ago. So I think it's quite a significant episode, this one, because of what he's actually done and achieved. Things like his TEDx, his ultras, you know, the development of his twins as well. So although I don't know what's on his list, I'm very, very intrigued to know, because I think 2024 has been a massive year for Rob. So the spotlight's on you. I don't know whether you've done this in any order, Rob. I don't know how you want to kick it off, because we're super prepared when it comes to these podcasts. So over to you.
I would say none of them are on that list.
Well, you can turn off now.
No.
Thanks very much, gents.
So a bit like if you've listened to our two podcasts with Dave and Ian, I think you guys have done mine. How my brain works, I just dump down the emotions that I felt towards certain podcasts I've been going through them. So rather than like an analogy, it's like how did it make me feel? To then try and the idea of today is if you've listened to this first episode and you're thinking about what this is all about, instead of having to listen to a podcast for 90 minutes or an hour or 30 minutes, you just listen to this bite size and think, oh, that's quite intriguing. I'm going to go and listen to that one to try and help develop me forward. So the first one I had down for me was the sleep. The R90 sleep cycle that we've had. Dave, we've all talked about it, and the importance of that one. Like, what I enjoyed mostly about Nick's, although it was a 90-minute almost podcast, I think the guy who planned in that side to it was a long podcast and hasn't listened to it, was actually understanding the importance of sleep within your environments. And the reason why I wanted to pull that was on because one of the first things I actually helped towards the recovery of me, because I was sleeping 2-3 hours a night going back into 2016. I was literally, that was my cycle. So like, if you are someone who's not sleeping right, I'm not trying to tell you something that it's been easy to me. My brain's always been a bit of a chatter. I've always struggled to go to sleep. And I remembered reading an article around this R90 cycle that you have to go through and these circadian rhythms and thinking, oh, this is pretty cool. I'm going to test it. Lo and behold, obviously all these years later, I was actually speaking to the guy who actually developed it and thought, how cool is this? Halfway through it, actually, this is the guy that I realized it. And for anyone who struggles to sleep, definitely worth listening to that episode. It just gets you to simplistically think about sleeping in 90-minute cycles and how you activate yourself for the day and how you set yourself up and the importance of it.
I was away this weekend with the in-laws, and we're all staying in the same house, big house. And the youngest is 11-month-old little baby. My kids were in bed and the baby goes to bed at 8 o'clock. And my wife's brother said, we're away. Let's not put him to bed. Let's keep him up a little bit longer. It's not my child. It's obviously their decision. So he stayed up for about another 50 minutes. I think he went to bed in the end at about 10 to 9. And the next morning, they'd had the worst night's sleep ever because he was up quite a lot and he was really grumpy in the morning and they were really struggling to get him down to his mid-morning nap. And I said to my brother-in-law, sleep patterns are based on a 90-minute window. And for kids, it's really important that they regulate at the same time. And if you put him to bed at 8 o'clock, then if you did want to keep him up, my advice would be keep him up for an hour and a half and then be aware that he may want to sleep longer because you'll probably find he can get into that REM sleep much quicker. He's a little bit hippie, flowy, argumentative, this chap. And he said, well, that's all well and good, Ian, but what about in the olden days when we all lived in trees and there were no clocks? How would you know when to put the baby to sleep? To which I said, if there's no clocks, then you do it on feel. So it's even more relevant because the baby would know when time is time to go to bed, as would you. You would just go to bed on your cycle more naturally rather than being forced. So it's quite an interesting topic of conversation. And I think it relates a lot to that. Is the question I'll throw back to you guys is, what do you feel about sleep if there's no clocks? how would that work? Because different seasons, you know, different thoughts, different vibes. It did get me thinking in my head. I was like, has he got a point there? Or is science science? You know, it's quite a difficult one. But that was my feeling. It is done on feel.
I'd say like from a having two children under the age of 2 and having through those cycles, like quite relative to what you're saying there, you know, the biggest thing that we do, like Kelly and I, outside of obviously what we do here, is we coach parents in twin parents, and one of the major factors they always struggle with is sleep.
Yeah.
And actually, what the bit that actually you're saying there is true in that element, because you have to look at what we call sleep cues. So, you know, and if people don't understand sleep cues and that's where they tend to struggle with the sleep cycles, them getting to sleep, them getting into a pattern. And sometimes people don't recognize that well enough. So actually sometimes a sleep cue might be they need to go to bed at half an hour earlier, not half an hour later, or they're ratty because they need their cycles out. And the amount of parents who struggle with that, but the amount of parents who then start to understand sleep cycles, sleep cues, and how it all works, the evidence shows that the kids tend to sleep better as they get into a pattern. But the biggest thing is, I think out of all of it, is it doesn't happen overnight. And I think that's the same with us as an individual. You can't just go right onto the sleep cycles and start this and then wake up next day thinking, oh, this is a load of shit. There's a period of time your body needs to adjust to how all of this works.
Yeah. Hence jet lag. You know, that's why we feel crap when we're out of the rhythm. Yeah, great point. Sleep, fundamental. What's next on the list from your feelings list, Rob?
So like the one I had from here is educate yourself on the ingredients you put in your body with Dimitri. And that was a fundamental one, because I was of a fuel advocate, and you know I loved having fuel, and he came up with good points on that one. And then off the back of that, I've tended to highlight that to a few people. So off the back of that, we now, like, you know, I make my own bread in our house because we don't want a list of ingredients on the back of fake bread, I call it. So that was a really big eye opener for anyone that isn't out there. Listen to Dimitri's podcast, because not only he's got amazing stuff about protein and light and all that sort of side to it. One of the things that he highlighted was, what's the other chemical shit that goes in and in something you think it's healthy.
Massive important.
Yeah, and off the back of your previous podcast, Dave, that we listened to last week, exactly the same thing you were talking about there. Like, what's the energy sources you're putting in your body? Is it 50% chemical and 76%, you know, 70% oils and wrong shit? And you think about it and you look at it and you go, actually, shit, what I thought was 100% actually is about 20% of that, and the rest of it's a load of other crap.
Mate, so scary. I'm doing doing an advanced nutrition course at university at the moment, and I've got some scary stats for you. So currently in the UK, 60% of the UK's diet is ultra processed foods. An increase of 10% of ultra processed foods into your diet increases your chance of dementia and Alzheimer's by 25%.
Wow.
Absolutely ridiculous. So scary stats out there. Scary stats out there. Basically, everyone's heading currently in the current regime, eating the foods that we do, which have grown over the years. But where we're at right now is kind of like we need to really look at this, guys. The link between dementia, Alzheimer's, and other associated diseases have been directly linked to the foods we're eating, as the links to ADHD, depression, and everything else. We really, really need to be looking at our foods, Rob, and you're bang on right for putting it right up there in the top 5.
What is Rob? Could you put your bread recipe and process in the group and tag me as well? Because I think that's a really cool thing for people to do with their kids as well on the weekend. Get the bread ready for the week.
Do you know what I love the most? Was this weekend, Kel got me a video, because the kids are now tall enough, so they've got a little chair little stool they put for washing their hands at the kitchen sink, and now it's the same height for it. And I was like, this was a proper moment for me as a dad. Ted and Em were both climbing up on, and I was showing them how to knead bread. I was like, kneading, because they've seen Daddy, like Daddy does it. Daddy's baking bread. Kel calls it Brady Bakes as a joke, and I put some stuff up on socials about it. But just 5 ingredients. I now know those 5 ingredients. I now know how to make it. So I haven't got to worry about getting the book out and stuff like that. And I just love the fact that now the kids are now in that stage where they can start to make their own bread. And that is actually something that my mum taught me years ago. That's not almost had forgotten. about the importance of actually that was something that I did with my parent, my mum especially.
Mm.
Can I just ask a really quick question on this? I know you've got a long list to go through, but just a really quick one. What is it that's different between your bread and a bread that I buy from, let's say, Morrison's bakery or a packet loaf of bread? What are the ingredients that yours doesn't have that does have?
Okay, well, I'll tell you the ingredients that mine has is yeast, water, salt, flour, like bread flour, and olive oil, and that's it.
Okay.
So if you were to look at that and compare it to even the Morrison's bakery, not your traditional loaf packet loaf, that has like 20 different ingredients in it still.
What are they, preservatives and additives to
Preservatives, additives, and just like and I the thing with me, I always felt was this is the thing that changed it. Was one actually really fresh bread does last longer. You assume it should last longer, but it actually lasts that longer. It doesn't go as moldy because it's actually fresh.
Yeah.
And two, like for me, I've got a weird cute smell to chemicals. And I used to find that when bread used to go a bit stale, I'd open the thing, I could smell that. And that was the chemicals going off rather than actually the bread.
Okay.
And so now you don't get that same part to it. And also from like people I know have had some health conditions who still like to have a bit of bread. You know, I don't really tend to eat a lot of bread. It's more for the kids. You tend to eat it, you do feel less bloated.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's the difference I find with sourdough versus,
Yeah.
you know, just a loaf of Hovis white bread or whatever. Just yeah, the difference in digesting that is quite drastic. In terms of like fresh food and packaged food and what we're talking about here as well, this is a statistic which blew my mind the other day. So if everyone that's listening or watching visualize in their hand a small apple, the weight of that apple, the size of that apple, that is the amount of plastic through microfiber plastics that the average human consumes in a year.
Wow.
Because of packaged food, because of the little microfibers that are in it. Is an apple, we consume an apple of plastic on average every single year. So I'm 40, so I've eaten 40 plastic apples in theory.
Wow. I've eaten more than that. I'm not going to tell you how many.
I was saying, as a dad of two twins at the moment, I'm eating a lot of plastic fruit, so I get the size of that actually because I was only having some of that shoved in my mouth today as pretend food.
Actual plastic fruit.
Yeah.
What's next on the list, Rob?
One which I came across, which I thought about, was James Farley. You know, Dave and I, we did that episode, and it was a quick one, really. Like it was more about love and relationships. But what I loved about the most of him is he seems quite, you know, an influential space in what he does. And I just thought, from an episode, if anyone wants to listen back to someone who actually honestly talks about their relationships, being a relationship coach, I put down here an honest influencer. Because it's a great episode to listen to if you want to learn how to develop a better relationship with your family, but from someone who actually is still honest, that it's not like 100% good and he's some amazing guru that doesn't have it. He talks about in that one the same shit that we all go through. So it was relatable, but also some stuff in there actionable, how you can bridge the gaps to create a more harmonious relationship with your partner and most relationships in general.
Yeah. There's not many podcasts out there like that as well, so it's definitely worth a listen. Yeah, great episode.
Number 4 was fasting. I love the fasting episode with Alex Russell. It's something that I've got really into, and actually being a part of this project has really inspired me to longer lengths because, you know, off the back of that one, we did some fasts together. And the biggest question I got off the back of most people say, why do you do it? And then I questioned to them, says like, okay, well, why do you put your plastic, you know, an apple of plastic in your mouth for a year? Or why do you eat those crisps? And you think, I'm weird fasting my body, but you think it's weird eating shit plastic food. So I would say for anyone listening out there who listens to the episode, it's great. I have actually shared it with some people out in America recently. Everyone found it really, really good, and she was doing a 5-day fast, and it really helped to support her. So it's a good one for anyone looking to do a longer fast. But even from a basic fast, you know, start small, start with the small steps. Fast for a morning, see how you get on a morning, and try and do a day, do a couple of days over a course of a couple of months, get used to that and build from that. I wouldn't go to extreme of a 5-day fast, but the bit that you have with the fasting is not starving yourself. It's listening to how your body reacts to sustained periods of not having to burn its energy digesting your food. And how do you feel?
I think between now and the end of the year, we should do a pack 100-hour fast. I think we got that in our locker. We did 72, didn't we? So I think, you know, can we go? It's not, I don't think that's quite 5 days, is it? But could we do 100-hour? Because it's, and could we get some of the group in it as well? So that would be something that I'd be locked in and committed to if the rest of the gang is as well. We'll pick a date to do it before Christmas so that we're lean, mean, turkey eating machines.
100%. Do you know what I think? Another one to add to that, Rob, is I think, and you made a great point there where people think that it's crazy. And I think people potentially may have the wrong idea about what fasting is. Most people think fasting is just restricting food, but they don't really know the reason why you're restricting the food. So to put it into context, eating food is one of the hardest things that the body can do. It zaps it of pretty much all of its energy. And the way I see fasting and want to think about is when we're fasting, what I'm trying to do is get myself out of the way so my body can repair itself. When my body's not trying to digest food, it's in repair mode. When I'm calm, it's not trying to digest food and I'm safe, it goes into repair mode and it starts to repair all of the ailments that I've given myself over the years. I tend to find that fasting is the only way I can get long periods of recovery, because that's what it is doing. So try to think of fasting not as not eating and making yourself starving. Try and think of fasting as a way to get yourself out of your own way so that the body can do what it does naturally and repair itself. And the more of a time period you can leave that, the more beneficial the repair is going to be. And if you think about it like that, as opposed to starving yourself, it might give you the energy to go forward with it, but certainly help you think a little bit more about the benefits of why we're fasting. It's not because we're all crazy. It's not because we all want to show that we've got massive muscles and we're the best thing in the world. It's not. I'm just trying to get out of myself because I am an idiot. I do drink too much. I do the wrong things a lot of the time, just like every other human. So occasionally get myself out of my own way and allow my body to recover.
Kel, my partner Kel, she's got type 2 bipolar, and fasting was something that she introduced me to originally, off the back of it starting that process, and she did it from a perspective of energy levels and resetting herself rather than it being a fasting for food. And the only analogy I can always almost relate to is almost like, you know, every period of time your car needs to go into the garage and they put it up on the ramp and then they drain the oil out, the engine's bare, and then they put new oil in and then it's refresh. So that's the only analogy I could probably say to anyone relatable out there. That's the process you're doing. So that was number 4. Number 5 I've got here is actually to you, Ian, and I've mentioned it before, but I put down it inspirational. You know, your podcast you did around your ultra running has inspired me to continue doing my ultra running. So if I don't think I've ever met you over the last 12 months and listened to that journey, I think that was the one. So the word you use, and like you said in the previous podcast, you know, it's the non-negotiable contract you have with yourself to do those actions. I'd say, like, listen to Ian's podcast. You know, I've always enjoyed it. So it's been an honor to be a part of that journey. And that also leads on to saying so, because those are big challenges you do, ultra and stuff like that. And number 6 I got was what is your second mountain, which is only a recent podcast we had recently with Mike Bates. And for me, as the age of 37 and achieved some stuff, and you know, I'd say I had quite a big burnout that I would probably, you know, most people would probably have received in their sort of late 30s into 40s. I had that in my late 20s. It's been quite reflective on the Mike Bates podcast, and he's got a book he recommended, which is the Second Mountain book, and I've been listening to that, and it's been a very reflective role of coming up to my 40s about, like, you know, what do I want in my 40s and 50s that are meaningful actions. And actually, I'd probably the most reflective of that, the book, is last year I became Kent Mental Wellbeing Champion, and this year I was actually on the panel for adjudicating it, and those people have now started to receive those nominations of those awards. And I actually have felt more joy out of seeing those people who really deserved it. When you're in a room, reading the nominations, the hard work, and then seeing someone being rewarded for that, I actually got more joy out of seeing them come through than actually my first ever nomination. So to me, like, the second mountain is that next calling I want to go through.
Love that, mate.
Love it.
So yeah, if you're sat in those late 30s going into 40s, like, you know, a lot of our listeners out there, the 80% of our listeners out there, or in your 40s struggling, definitely recommend listening to Mike Bates' podcast, and also look at the book, that Second Mountain book. It'd be a good one to go by. Number 7 for me, Todd Crush. I put this one down because it was very relatable in the fact of I've used running to heal myself from a lot of my mental health problems. And that's not to say I've like it solves it. It's very relatable to that. I use my running as a sort of a mechanism for me, and I certainly feel if I don't run. But what I loved about his podcast was a lot of us struggle to face our fears, and he ran fucking to it and ran in the depths of it until that fear literally went away, which was, you know, a guy running around him that was his. He thought he was there and he wasn't there. Like, that's even more scary than some of the fears you might be worried about doing. So it's a great to listen to go, if you've got that inkling and you want to change stuff and you're fearful of it, go and listen to that episode and you'll probably be out running something or doing something.
I reckon that particular podcast is my number one podcast out of all of them, and it's because it's so inspirational.
Yeah,
I literally walked away with a solid, concrete belief that anybody can do anything, and it was him that supplied me with the mortar to put them bricks together. Yeah. That podcast there it's definitely the most inspiring podcast, in my opinion, that we've got on. And what a tale! Yeah, love that, Rob.
Yeah, that podcast is talk about a light bulb going off in your head, you know, to talk about mindset, to talk about decisiveness, to talk about all of these things. But the struggles that guy had prior to making the decision in that moment that enough was enough and he was going to handle it was, insanely powerful to see one end of the spectrum to the other. You know, there's not a lot of the people that can relate anywhere near to that. So it was very, very, very inspirational, like you both say. It's
what I found the most part of it is that all of us have fears that are how do I put this? They're fears that are not real in some capacity. You know what I mean? You can have a fear that you generate inside you, and that's why you don't take the action. And yes, Todd's fear wasn't actually in existence. The guy wasn't running around smashing cars with that, but visually to him, that fear was there. That was a human form doing that. And so that is another level to try and take on. And the fact that he just said, I kept him running until he just disappeared. Like, that was the, you know what I mean? That was the poignant moment for it, because I thought, like, wow, actually, imagine being in that. What an inspiration. Imagine being in that process. You're running along the roads and all of a sudden you start to see your fear actually dissolve in front of you.
Yeah.
You know what? I actually asked him a question on this, and it was based on another podcast. And I asked him in that moment what changed. And basically what had happened in that one moment, his belief changed. The belief of who he was, what he was capable of, changed in that moment. And a lot of this was built, this previous belief by the wrong upbringing that he had, unfortunately. Listen to the podcast, we don't want to take too much time on it, but needless to say, he had a horrible life previously. But that belief, that was why, in fact, it was why on my pod I brought up belief, and it was because of Todd Crush. He literally cemented in for me that if you believe you can, you can. Amazing.
So that was number 7. Number 8, I had, and it goes back to you, Dave. Your podcast highlighted a lot for me, and that was, for me, was partnership.
Yep.
So for me, like, I'll be honest with you, having my ADHD brain and never really being understood, I never really formed a lot of relationships. So I always felt like I had to be a solo person, do it all. No one else can do it because I don't understand it. And and that has led to a lot of exhaustion over a period of time, a lot of failed projects. So that podcast has inspired me. So things like, I wanted to set up a mental health run, and I was trying to do it all myself. And I found a partnership with a charity that wanted to do it. The company is actually organising it, and all I need to be the person is to plot the route, be a part of the organisation, and we've created a partnership, and we're still delivering that. And if I was trying to do that myself, it would still be in the planning stage, like it would have been done for 3 or 4 years. So if you haven't listened to a podcast like that, do listen to Dave's, because that'll get you to understand that if you are a solo entrepreneur, or you're someone who likes to take control of everything, listen to it and realize the importance of partnerships and collaborations amongst different people. And that comes with understanding your strengths and your weaknesses, and who's the people who are going to support your weaknesses.
100%. Had the same on mine. Yeah. A lot of power came from that one, Dave. It was early on in the thing, but I think a lot of people, it was a bit of an eye opener for a lot of people to go, oh shit, need to be aware of that. Take it for granted, don't take it for granted, that sort of scenario. So
definitely slapped me in the chops at one point, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. Love it.
That one was that one. Number 9, is it now? Yeah, number 9. I had fatherhood, and this is a shout out to all of us as a part of the pack, and all the alternative episodes to our guest episodes that we've had. And I feel being a newer dad to the scene, and I'm going to put it out there because this is my own feelings, you feel deflated sometimes. You feel like you're the dad. You know what you're doing, especially when you're a twin dad and you've got 2 kids in your arms, and people think you're stupid. Sometimes you don't know what you're doing. You're like, hang on, no. Like, I've been there through. What I've loved about all of our episodes is the proof that there is the other version of what people assume out in society, is that there's men out there who are dads who are champion better fatherhood, and to inspire children and the children's children, and changing that perception that we have out there, that we're like the number 2 in the family when it comes to how we can influence and support our children. So we've got a lot of episodes that are in there. So if you search parenting amongst any of our episodes, you'll find a lot of gem and gold that we've given in there. And a big thank you to all of us that have been a part of it, on the honesty and the sort of vulnerability we've presented ourselves in, and being dads and fatherhood and males in society.
Not easy, is it? It's not easy. It's not easy. I caught up with one of my friends who's just had his second, probably only about, I don't know, 6 weeks old, the baby. And he was like, yeah, of course, it's different with 2, isn't it? I was like, yeah, I told you it's different with 2. And then I was talking to someone this weekend, actually, where they'd not been around their 1-year-old as much as they'd like to have been. So they struggle to get her down to sleep, because they're not the mum who's always done it. And you kind of all of these little things, and we ended up talking about what you really want to know. Like when you go to an NCT class, for example, before you have your first baby, really it's all set up for the mums, and to sort of talk them through, birthing and what's going to happen. Kind of the male sort of, it's almost pointless being there a little bit really in an NCT class, because you're kind of just a bit of a third-class citizen in the room. But there needs to be like pre-baby men's groups where you go and you get told by other dads, like, if you don't have skin-on-skin contact with that baby in the first 4 days, the bond is missed. You need to put them on your chest, put a blanket over you like the mother does. You need to do a feed. You need to do bedtime. You need to bath them. You need to connect instantly with those babies right at the beginning, if you want to be an even parent and not a disproportionate parent. There needs to be that in this world. And I'm sure there are those groups, but they're not as well publicised or as PR'd as an NCT class, which is, in my eyes, not overly relevant to the male or to the dad in this case. I think that's something that should be championed, something that should be created, because exactly as you said there, it's not easy, and most of the narrative out there is for the mother, and I totally get why, because bloody hell, they go through the birth, right? But if we're to support our children and the mother in the way that some dads want to, then there needs to be some more education around it outside of what there is now, I think. And I think this podcast has been really good at helping dads with children in that kind of latter stage, but there's a whole lot of stuff that could happen before birth, I think, as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm on 10, yeah, number 10 now. So 10, I put down pivot. And this is Emma Pallant Brown's pivot, Dimitri's pivot, Stephen James Cott pivot, Dan and Jess's pivot. We all have pivots. So if you are in that moment where you're at a loss and you're pivoting, like, just be safe in the fact that listen to some of these episodes and look at like what they thought was going to be their career and 5 years later and how it pivoted. So you got to recognize that you're in a pivot and it's not the end. And it was a lot of relatable back to it, because if you think about me, I look back and think if I was 10 years ago to where I'm now, even 5 years ago to where I am now, I had quite an extreme pivot in the last 3 or 4 years. And now I've got, 2 beautiful children and a supportive partner and a great career. So
yeah,
you never know what that pivot's going to end up with.
100%. Yeah, my pivot, I'm here with you guys. I wouldn't have been if I didn't decide to pivot. God knows where I'd have been, but I definitely wouldn't have been sat here. That's a fact. Yeah, I love that, mate. And so when you say pivot, just so that, because we hear the word a lot, what does that mean? If you're the average guy, where would pivot come into there?
So
we'll
bring it into this episode here. Yeah. Ian's pivot, like Ian's had a great pivot. His pivot was you just got a new house. You're a little child, literally, when she just literally born.
So Grace was 3. Yeah,
Grace is 3.
Just taken on a massive
and then you'd be made redundant. So like, that's a huge pivot, because you'd have been standing at the thing thinking, fuck. And even if you said it in the last few episodes of the podcast and you said about avocado and what you've achieved in the last 4 or 5 years, think about no one even knew, or even avocado was on the radar, and to what it is now. Like, that's a pivot. So the pivots are things you face in your life. You think, oh my God, how am I ever going to get over this? And recognizing that this is an opportunity to pivot and not go on the same hamster wheel that you look down and, the second mountain, you're 30 years down the line and think this is a load of shit. The pivot is there for a reason, to help change. It's how you control that change to grow.
A better goal, taking a new path towards a better goal.
Yeah, and I think sometimes pivots are the universe telling you, you're not going to change it, so I'm going to change it for you. So let's go.
Fair play, mate. Love it.
Yeah. I just came back from Chamonix, and obviously the mountains up there are massive. And in terms of pivot and making it relatable and why it's natural that's life, and there is no straight line. When you go up a mountain, what you realize is when it rains, the water comes down like this, because that's the route down. That's the sort of the navigated route down. And if you see animal trails, they also go like this. And when everyone climbs a mountain, no one climbs a mountain straight up, a proper mountain. It's all zigzagged, because it's too hard to go straight up. You have to go to that side, and then you pivot, and you go to that side, and then you pivot. And when you run down it, you couldn't run down it. Your knees would collapse and you would just roll down and die. So you have to go side to side to get down it. And it's natural to pivot. Don't be scared of it. Embrace it. Take the corner on, and just know that if you don't take the corner, the edge is not the way to go, basically. So yeah, really, really valuable point there, Rob. I like that one a lot.
Yeah.
And then we've got the last 2. So number 11 was keep it simple. And this was from Darren's podcast. I'm in a position where I coach a lot of businesses across the UK and the estate agency side, and everyone fucking overcomplicates stuff too much. And so if you are in that and you keep over, like you said, Ian, I think you said, like, everyone sets these goals, but like the goals on a piece of paper, you setting the goals, are they being done? And I think a lot of people they overcomplicate business strategy and what's happening, and they never simplify it enough that if you listen to that podcast, you'll probably recognize that half of that 80% of the shit you think you're going to need to do, you don't need to do, just do the 20%.
Yeah. Love that, mate.
I
keep
think
things
so.
as simple as I possibly can in everything. It's really front of my brain to simplify things. I learned a long time ago that some people don't understand some of the things that I do and vice versa. And I try to simplify absolutely everything. And it's such a point, mate. Keeping everything simple is probably one of the quickest ways to, it's not what you're going to do, it's what you're not going to do. A lot of the time, if you look at how Musk is running these new companies now, it's not what we're going to do, it's what we're not doing anymore that we don't need to do. Get rid of all that shit. Keep it simple. Less moving parts equals less problems. Love it.
Yeah. And then the last one is who's your pack?
Yeah.
You know, and I think like if you think about the context of anyone's listening out there, we've met as a pack once properly, and in different times we've blended with each other when we've met up socially or being a part of all of it. But we've built a pack virtually that we've met each other pretty much on a weekly basis, and that has evolved. And so if you are struggling to find your pack, the pack doesn't need to be your next door neighbor or someone you meet down a pub or a bit colleague. It could be virtually as well, but you got to do is you've got to find the pack that resonates with it. So the pack, in the last 12 months has been a phenomenal transition in, what we've done over the last 12 months to when we started to where we are now. So I thought I just wanted to highlight the importance of the pack.
Yeah, we've all covered that one. Dave said, about the 5 people around you. And I think, on mine, I summarised, how fortunate and privileged it's been to be part of it. So, and I include the group and the audience in that, and the people that interact, with the Facebook group and listen to the podcasts and stuff like that, because it's great for us, but it's really nice that we're able to kind of share it with other people as well. And I think what this year has done, clearly from the episodes that we've unfolded, which we haven't done that with an agenda and we haven't done it with any communication between us. We've just done our own takeaways. There's a theme in them that are similar, and then there's just totally different takeaways for all of us as well, which is really cool. It'd be great to hear in the group or in comments, from people that listen, what their top 2 or 3 or 12, if they want to do 12 like we have, takeaways have been from the podcast as well. And Rob, I said at the start, for me being connected to you in the way that we have over the last 12 months, to have done your first ultra, to have done TEDx, to have done Wim Hof experience, it's been a phenomenal year. So although you spoke about your feelings there, what does the next 12 months look like for you in terms of, 1 or 2 big things, big mountains that you're looking to climb? Is that something that you've thought about yet, or are you just fully focused on finishing the year? But I don't know, what's the next big thing for you? Because this year's going to be a hard one to top with what you've achieved. Like, out of the group of us, there some standout, like, dream board stuff that you've ticked off there.
I have been reflective of next year, and next year is a family-based one. And it's, I don't know, so next year is the pursuit of seeing Kel fulfill her dreams, which is one of my goals. So she manifested everything she ever wanted to achieve. The only thing she couldn't manifest, or she wanted to pursue, was achieving to being a counsellor. So the next year she will finish that. But I know, going back to what we talked about, balance and energy levels, she's got a lot of effort to put into that. She's now training to be a counsellor 1 day a week. She's now training on another day, and she's now teaching as well, then being a twin mum. So I recognise for the first 6 months, my first 6 months is to give my time back to her. And I know it's going to be important. And her to fulfill that, and then the latter part of the year will probably be my.
Wow. Do you know what, mate? I don't know if anybody's listening to this and not watching it now. I can see the emotion in your face right this second of how much, without you saying anything, mate, of how much this means to you. And I don't want to make you emotional, don't want to make you cry at the end of the pod or anything like that, but it's clear to see how strong that is. And mate, What a lovely thing to do. You're banging on there. You're literally answering everything I've said, everything James said, everything Ian said, and you said that there. What you're doing right now, mate, looks like the number one thing to do for you. And
so clear as well. So clear to see. She's about to build a massive extension, and you're going to be the scaffolding. So, you know, it's really cool. Really, really cool.
You know, we highlighted this before. You know, you're talking about like what next, and that mountain and the pursuit of stuff. Like it's that trilogy that you talk about, Ian, all the time. Like I've had a great year this year, and you can't. There's a partnership with all of it. I mean, that's the reason why you have family and your friends and your partners and your loved ones and your children. And sometimes you have to take a step back to allow them to excel. And I think that at the end of that, you know, she'd be a fully qualified counsellor, pursuing her dream, and that will ultimately cement us in what we want to achieve. Is our collaboration. That's the one fundamental thing I'll probably leave on the last bit. Cal and I call our twin podcast called the Collaboration Twins. We collaborate together, so it's all about collaboration with us. So you can't just have collaboration one way. It has to be a partnership.
Yeah, love that. Collaboration. What's your collaboration? You know, who's it with? What are your plans? Who are you going to collaborate with on those plans? Who's your accountability partner? Who do you love a lot out there that's got a big goal that you can be their accountability partner to? All really good things to kind of take away from this episode and think about. And yeah, it's got me reflecting, you know, because I've got my goals for next year, but have I taken for granted other people's goals that are close to me, and just pulling them on a path that they don't want to come on? Have to think about that as well. So yeah, thank you for that, Rob, at the end, because that's a really, really cool way to end it and get people thinking. So another cracking podcast where we've sort of just unbunked authentically, you know, things going on in our head from the last 12 months. And I'm excited to see what the next 12 does with the project, you know, with the pack, with the group, with the events, with the training. And if people want our support in some way or another, please reach out. You know, we'd love to help. If people want to reflect some questions on us, if people want us to become their accountability partner because they can't think of someone that they would trust to do it at the moment and they think we would be the right people, then reach out as well, because, you know, that's a conversation we'd love to help people with too. So yeah, thanks to Rob Brady for this episode. Spotlight's been on him, although the sun went in off the window halfway through, but it was still shining on him. A great end, great middle, great beginning, like all good stories. So we'll be back next week with another one. Thanks everyone for listening.